Fint, då är det dags för vår internationella panel som idag ska prata lite om musikindustrins framtid eller åtminstone de internationella aspekterna och kanske med lite fokus på digitala marknaderna. Och till vår hjälp idag en fantastisk moderator, en stor applåd för Per Strömbäck.
Jag bad att få en låt. Hörde ni vad det var? Mrs Robinson. Men vilken inspelning var det? Vilken inspelning av Mrs Robinson? Lemonheads. Det var ju Lemonheads. Kommer ni ihåg? I'd like to introduce my band because I have a great band. I'm not Evan Dando, but I like to think sometimes. But I like to please band join me. Dear panelists. Okay, let's see if I can pull this off. The idea is that these people flew in from all these different countries and continents, just like the Lemonheads did when they recorded Mrs. Robinson, and they did it all in one take, and it's an epic song. So of course this has to be an epic panel. It's going to be an epic panel. So you are now actually the Lemonheads version of Manifest, the international panel. And I'd like to, thank the supporting acts for building your appetite for the main event. And I'd like to introduce on the microphone Evan Dando, aka Helen Smith. You're the executive chairman of Impala, the Independent Music European organization. As Juliana Hatfield, Åsa Carild, who is now in a new role in London to do with digital licensing, ICE something. You have to explain that to us in a second. As Patrick Murphy, yeah, I don't know. Charles Caldas from Merlin Music. Welcome, very much welcome to you. And last but not least, our Ben Daly, Trond, Tornes. And you're actually the most international of all. You're from Oslo, and you're from London, and you're from New York at the same time. So here we have international businessmen. Forget the Lemonheads members now. I think that joke has played its part. International businessman we have from London, Brussels, and London again, and I'm from Enskede Gård. This panel is independent music ready for its craft beer moment. Has anyone read the column by Edwin Scroter in Music Business Worldwide on this with the same title? Somebody has? Hands up. Who read it? Okay, some people read it. The others just started Googling really quickly. Well, the point is, I guess, that we could have a different... we can label independent music differently. We can take a page from the breweries of craft beer, the microbreweries, and try to create something exclusive. So first out, and to discuss this, not only do I have a very international panel, they also actually represent digital licensing in various ways. Trond, Phonofile, you deliver the actual files.
That's right. That's the basis of what we started with in Phonofile, delivering the files. But of course, that's now a hygiene factor, and now we build marketing and digital marketing on top, and we do knowledge development as part of also a toolbox that was here, the phone panel, and we help indie labels with the strategy really also. So yeah, it's developing.
All right. And Åsa, you do the digital licensing.
Yeah, and I'm
for him.
Could be, actually. Yeah, it's intervened. But I'm very afraid to answer now. But he told me that whatever you say, don't say it boringly. People might fall asleep. So I try to find an angle of this, making it sound terrific and fantastic, and I couldn't really do to it. But I represent with the company I work with the songwriters and the publishers, so that side of the same song. So Trond makes a song and he releases the song on Phonofile, and I fight with YouTube to get his song monetized for the songwriting rights. It's the same song. It's licensed by differently. So we do all the dragons for all of Europe, and hopefully beyond that in the future.
All right. Yeah, global domination should always be the goal. Helen, you represent the independent music labels, the recording industry, the independent recording industry. Okay. In Brussels.
Yeah, and national associations like SOM who are members. And I mean, we don't do any actual licensing, obviously, but we represent the interest of the members when it comes to working out what the common points are. Are there any issues that we need to get tough on with the regulators in Brussels? What are do we negotiate? How do we handle it? So we look at it at a sort of collective level rather than a specific licensing level, which is more Charles's job.
Yes, Charles. Merlin, I think most people have heard about Merlin Music, but you are sort of the recording rights aggregator for all these independent music labels, is that correct?
I mean, in the spirit of not being boring, I'm running down the runway and there's 40 tech companies chasing me and the helicopter's just taking off, and I grab on with one hand and then I fall off and my parachute didn't open, and then just before I hit the ground I sign all the license deals and all the labels are happy. And well, then my wife comes and says hello to me because and my children, so the ending's a bit boring, but other than that it's extremely exciting and daredevil life that I lead, yes.
And then the bombers come in and it's
that's for the
turns
sequel.
into Jerry Bruckheimer's
That's for Merlin too. This time we're really angry. But no, we represent about 705 companies who between them represent tens of thousands of independent record labels and distributors from 46 countries around the world, and we do digital licensing for online uses of their music, yes.
And before you say there's no composers or artists on stage, Åsa, you're also a composer and artist, but here we have sort of the business value chain of digital licensing. Charles, is independent music ready for its craft beer moment?
I mean, I think independent music has been the craft beer for a long time already. I think people who value authenticity and things that are not mass-produced have enjoyed independent music since the first independent labels, probably in the 1920s when they first started, releasing raw blues records and authentic, music from the American South. I think it's definitely it's craft beer moment in terms that it's much easier now for the public to find that craft beer. And there used to be that to get to the craft beer, you had to go to the microbrewery, which is in a shack in the mountains, and it was very difficult to get to. And you had to go with me on my helicopter. But now you can get the craft beer in the supermarket, and it's available everywhere, and everybody gets to taste it, and it's reasonably priced, and it's delicious, and it's more successful than it's ever been.
But didn't some of the magic get lost when you didn't have to travel all that way to taste the beer?
I don't think so, because I think the magic is still there. The magic is in what's created, and that's across all genres and across all territories, and I don't know, across all kinds of music that you can think of. I think the magic comes from the moment when somebody interacts with someone. I think anybody who's liked any kind of artist that's ultimately become successful, much as you get a little bit annoyed that everybody else knows about them now, it doesn't change that what they made was beautiful and touched you. So, for me, I'm happy that you can have the supermarket experience with the artist, but at the same time you can go to their show and interact very directly or buy something special that they've created. And I think we've seen a lot of artists do that in the last few years. If you look at the way, Nick Cave, who's now an artist in his 50s and is still releasing albums, is available everywhere on YouTube and Spotify, but still makes these beautiful books and handwritten items that people will pay hundreds of pounds for, because that's, they want a whole case of craft beer. They don't just want one. So if you're willing to buy by the case and you're willing to travel that extra yard and pay that extra money, then I think it's there for you. So it's a long way of saying I'm incredibly optimistic about where independents sit in the digital marketplace. And can I just say, Evan Dando, since you came out of rehab, you're looking amazing. I thought you were going to be dead by now, but it's great. Welcome back.
Yeah, we're certainly glad to see you. And Evan
Been inspired by the craft beer revival.
Well, it's also your 15th birthday, not
Yes.
as Evan Dando,
Yeah.
but as an organization.
15 years old.
Yeah, not bad.
Out of rehab already at 15.
Yeah, childhood, not what it used to be.
Yeah. Well, 15 years is a short time and a long time for an organisation, but we've seen obviously huge developments in the market, and it is interesting to see a lot about the craft beer movement, because it's a movement that's old and very young, and has got particularly successful in the last few years. And I think what Edwin is saying is, are there initiatives that the craft beer movement took that as the music sector can look to now? Because what we can see is that in a way the craft beer movement has developed in exactly the same way as independent labels. So you build a following based on your label and your brand, not just on an individual beer or an individual artist. And then, just like in music, the majors realised that was successful, and that was capturing the eyes of consumers in music. So what they would masquerade as independent labels, and you've seen exactly the same thing in craft beer. So you have the major breweries who see that the drastic slump in sales, and they want to recreate. They want to be part of that movement, which I think is quite similar in music as well. But now, what I think Edwin is saying, and others are saying too, is that we have such a natural advantage, and we account for 80% of all new releases. Yet when you look at the market share and you look at the revenues, then there's a considerable gap. So what can we do to actually, as a sector, to collectively inspire and move forward, maybe in a way that we haven't thought of before? And I think that's what that kind of debate is interesting.
I think you always need a sort of a platform to grow from. I see that some, for example, have done some great initiatives lately, just with bringing attention to playlists and sort of bringing the entire indie market in Sweden together, and sort of get the attention together and have the more muscles doing that. But
I think that's where it's actually lacking a bit now, because I feel like where it should be was like the international indie list. This is the most important music from in the industry, and that should be fronted on all the players in the world. And I feel a bit sorry that we haven't come that far yet. So I feel maybe it's a craft beer moment, but we haven't got out there to label that good enough, because I think the attraction to the music is better than ever. So there's a momentum we should take advantage of and use better. I know there's good initiatives, and I'm sure we're going to see something, but I would really like to hear something about it.
And I was just wondering, do you think that the roles of labels have changed lately due to the way digital consumption of music is different from before? I mean, when you had a record to hold in, you saw that you know it came from this record label. Now when you see all the playlists and everything, it's not as much connected to a specific label as, at least in my mind, it was before. Oh, Twisted Nerve, they're releasing this, and so do you think it has the labels today have a little bit less visibility than they used to?
I think yes and no. When you see that it's more hard to market a brand, a label now, they have much less profile. But I guess that's something that we need to work on and develop. But compared with the space that you have in a physical product or the artwork, you don't have the same space, and I don't think search facilities are as sophisticated as they could be in order to promote the brands. But then when you've got your channels on YouTube and you have different mechanisms, I mean, what Charles was saying earlier, we had lunch, and he was saying that actually your figures show that there's a lot more reason to be optimistic than just focusing on certain
Yeah.
aspects.
I mean, I think the brand identity of the labels is really interesting, but to me, the labels that get the culture right are building, and new labels are coming in and really building a culture around themselves. But that's about the core values of what's always driven the independent sector. It's it's authenticity, it's consistency, it's quality, it's all of those things that attracted people to factory records or whatever the labels we loved when we were growing up, which maybe were around the packaging. Now it feels like it's about a particular vision or a particular person or a particular level of authenticity. I mean, I think that the positive things that we see is in the digital world where the channels are all of a sudden open. You're not fighting for the front of the record shop anymore or for space on the shelf. You have this playing field in front of you that actually rewards how creative and how aggressive you are in how you manage it. You can get yourself further ahead in front of the market than you have ever been able to do. The challenge is, and if we keep coming back to this craft beer analogy, is it's that point at which you engage the consumer to really believe in your particular story or your particular vision. And I think some people do that incredibly well. I mean, I was, again this morning, had a meeting with a label with an artist that's playing here tonight in Stockholm, which is from Australia, where I spent most of my career. And there's a label that was started by a young guy 5 or 6 years ago, actually maybe 8 years ago, but he's just been absolutely singular in his vision, and he's gone from running this tiny club night in Sydney to, last year at South by Southwest being the hardest gig to get into. So all of a sudden something from all the way down there has become, because of that singularity of vision and authenticity, has become really attractive to a whole bunch of people who want to be a part of it. So I think there's definitely lessons there and there's definitely parallels there. I don't know if the margins in digital music are the same as they are in selling expensive bottles of craft beer. And I think that's the challenge for the industry, right? We have a slightly different wholesale model.
Also, it's interesting to see that the craft beer you can pay the double price because it's craft beer sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's something we might be better at in the industry, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. When I used to work for a label many years ago, I was frustrated that we could only charge about the same price as any other record, even though we had spent so much money on making a nice video and cover art, etc. So it's frustrating. What are you going to do about that, Trond?
I was talking to this branding guru yesterday. He has been working with Coca-Cola and IKEA, which I believe is Swedish. Yeah. So it is Norwegian. Yeah, I was suspecting that. We bought it with the oil money.
Isn't it all the same?
Yeah, it's the capital
can go
of
now,
Sweden,
Helen.
Norway. No, so he was talking about the fact that they have like big systems of how to place a brand, and the authenticity, belonging, conviviality, that side, that always deliver juice to the most commercial, the top commercial brands, and they borrow aspirations from the authenticity place. So are we too, in the indie industry, are we too bad at crossing over when we need to? I think there's big exceptions like Excel that would go all the way. They can make it to the top and they keep their own integrity and do the whole thing. But I think generally maybe we are thinking a bit too less of ourselves as in the industry, because we actually deliver so much meaning to other brands up the chain. So that's one of the things I've been thinking of.
But I think that's also a bit of a cultural thing. I remember when we started Manifest many years ago, and we were supposedly sponsored by a few other to get more money in to make this work, and it's like, no, we don't sponsorship. It's bad, it's taking our authenticity down in a way, and have those mergers that are a win-win for both. I mean, in hip hop, they don't really care, do they?
Exactly.
They can be branded as
we
much
need hip hoppers.
It's like, yeah, it's fine to be as commercial as you want. It's nothing that takes you down. Whereas, if you're an indie pop act, you actually would feel a bit dirty.
Yeah,
if you get
isn't
connected.
that like a catch-22 of indie, Helen?
Yeah, no, it's difficult because I think also what you've got is a story. I think, you know, if an artist wants to go down a sponsorship route, then that's fine. Some won't want to, some will. But it's also about the story, and I think that is where the label identity is really important. So what does the label stand for? What's the story behind the label? Why are they working with this artist? The artist's story, the story of the album, which of course is changing now because it's a very track-focused environment, but the album remains very popular. I think Charles and Merlin, they've got some interesting statistics on the importance of the album still. And you know, all these stories and understanding the value, and basically about, I think the question on pricing is really interesting, because if we are responsible for 80% of new releases, 80% of the investment, I mean, we should be, you know, ideally we should be getting 80% of the revenue. I mean, if you measure what you're worth in terms of what new things you do and what value you add on a daily basis, then we can maybe turn negotiations around. I don't know if Merlin's able to bring in 80% of the revenue, but I think we have to add premium, don't we? We have to say we are a premium product. We offer artists a premium option. We have we invest and we do things differently, and that is what fans buy into. That's what I think they do anyway. But in order to, I think one of the questions that Edwin has is how we actually really tap into that.
Yeah,
Isn't that where the book of Nick Cave comes in, where you can actually make it an art subject and make that a limited thing? Because in digital, we can't really separate indie, and it's good to be in the big stores. That's, I mean, it being part of the market, I think it's definitely a good thing. Well, we tend to not take out all the juice we can take from the art world we also part of.
I mean, I think, you know, there's layers of value in the market, and there always have been. So, you know, before we even thought about the internet, and those of us who are old enough to have worked in the industry before that, there was all sorts of layers of value, from listening to the radio for free and never really buying anything, to only buying greatest hits records, to buying, you know, really special packages or imports or Japanese pressings. And there was this incredible complex set of layers in the marketplace. I think this looking for the silver bullet to say, okay, well, on-demand audio streaming is going to kill everything else, I just think is naive and is too simplistic a way to look at it. You know, the challenge is to recreate in really compelling and exciting ways all of those layers of value, to allow people to dive as deep as they like, or to just sit on the surface and ascribe the correct sets of value all the way up and down that value chain. And I think that's the exciting part about the future, is, you know, not just sitting and waiting for someone to save you, but actually taking your own future into your own hands and being creative and artistic, and, you know, whether that's wearing the right kind of sneakers in your hip-hop video or making a beautiful piece of art that you sell alongside.
But if we go back to the comparison with craft beer, I mean, it's been trending and it's become huge. And wouldn't the music industry kind of need the same, a new way of rebranding, a new way of product, a new way and shape and form to come out to become something special, something new that is not really here today? I mean, it could be new ways of services that works differently, but I feel like it feels that it doesn't really come out. It doesn't become the added value that it actually is in general people's perception.
But I think that's because there's not enough money in the market yet.
Yeah,
you know,
to
the value of the
do
market.
this.
You know, we still have to remember we're at the very, very beginning of an evolution. You know, this is the most fundamental shift we've seen in our industry probably in its entire history. And we're right at the beginning of this point of understanding what the possibilities are. And I agree. I mean, I think there's all sorts of possibilities to add things that you can hang off the existing ecosystem, and even the emerging ecosystem, that are probably things that we haven't even thought about yet, that add value in ways that you know, to me, that's where innovation comes in. You know, we've created a very basic framework of what it could look like, and now we need to innovate around what the possibilities are around that, with the view of adding all of these layers of value around it. I mean, my hope is that we last longer than craft beer, because, you know, I think in 10 years' time, every beer is going to be a craft beer.
And it has an
It
expiry
is-
date.
It is nearly already a craft.
That particular bottle has a consume by best before date, quite unlike music. Well, that's fine, and you've been very friendly, and you haven't disagreed at all so far for half an hour, in spite of the fact that I explicitly asked you to disagree. You talk about opportunities and possibility. Who cares about? I want to hear you complain. Helen, what's the biggest problem for independent music?
Oh, I think the biggest problem for independent music is the biggest phenomenon in society today in the digital world is the dominance and interdominance of certain players in the marketplace.
Which players?
Starting with Google and then filtering all the way YouTube and the fact that we now have, when we deal with negotiations or when we deal with issues and developments, we're dealing with a completely different environment. And those are the questions that are the most interesting and complex and difficult. Who controls the data? Who's taking what decisions? And in Impala, we had this really interesting situation whereby most members who are really vocal, would not really speak out on the YouTube case because, they were just afraid that, in that family somewhere, someone has the power to make you disappear, and that was, that was a real strange situation to be in. I mean, that's why organizations like SOM and Impala and others exist, because we can deal with the collective things that labels prefer not to. But that was really interesting, because you had a completely different environment.
Like a really bad boss or a jealous North Korean dictator punishing whoever disagrees with them.
And not paying tax in the process. I mean, these are the difficult things that citizens, and we're all citizens as well as working in the music sector as citizens. I mean, these issues are troublesome and objectionable. So we have to confront them.
And isn't it ironic then that this was kind of always the problem for the independent labels, the dominant players, but it used to be the majors, and now it's the internet platforms. Is it the same problem in a different shape?
It's both, because when you have only 3 majors and you have only a handful of platforms, then of course the rules of the game for the independents tend to be already established. It's easier to do that when you have the fewer players you have. I mean, that's what we predicted when Universal bought EMI, and now what we see in the concentration in the marketplace and the concentration with global playlists and the impact that has on how chart rules favour certain types of streaming, which of course has an impact on radio, which of course has an impact on what people listen to when they stream music. There is a kind of ever increasing level of concentration, which has a huge impact on independents, particularly independents who also want to break artists in the mainstream, and that of course is a very legitimate aim of lots and lots of labels. They don't want to be necessarily labelled as niche and important as craft beer. They want to take that artist to the world, and that's something which I think has, certainly the feedback we get, is becoming more difficult.
But when we look at it, it's where the indies, shouldn't they be the ones to innovate and do the new things? And shouldn't that in itself sort of go before the majors? So instead of having the problem, they're so big and we don't get on the place, why don't we do something completely new that turns the world around?
Helen, you're a great lobbyist because you stay on message. It's the dominant players. And we're going to ask Åsa what that new thing could be. But first, I don't want to hear about solutions. I want to hear you complain. What's the biggest problem?
I think everything goes too slow.
All right. But this is, in conferences like this, it's always like, the speed of change, we can't keep up.
Look at it. I mean, it's been ages for things to get solved. Micropayments, it took like 5-6 years to solve how to pay for something.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
And that sort of killed the entire music market because you couldn't solve having to pay for one download. So I think everything goes far too slow, and especially the music industry is way, way behind other industries, looking at what gaming technologies does. And I think also one way, if we find the dominant players being so problematic, one way is, could we look at alternative ways of surpassing, going directly to customers, finding solutions for that? That sort of could be as a combination to what is existing today, as a new, completely new way of sort of find a solution that sort of surpasses the problems that there is. But my main complaint is it's too slow.
Right, great. So dominant players, too slow. Trond, what's your biggest problem?
I think we are subject to an effect of split and divide, kind of, because all the money goes into the telcos and people owning structures. The music industry is dealing with fighting over the crumbs from the table of the rich. And the saddest thing in this picture is that the dominance in the industry is so hard because of the pressure which music industry has been under, and that willingness to dominate instead of seeing this as an innovative field where you need the indies to come up with new stuff, and it could be an ecosystem working with all kinds of that. I think we need to go more to a revolutionary kind of turning the industry upside down. And actually, what I am optimistic about, sorry to not complain all the time, but I'm quite optimistic as to how new producers and artists are seeing themselves. If they can get into a mobility world where they can distribute digitally, they can do a digital marketing and do promotion in the territories where they want to sell music. It's actually starting to be a more different world. And I see that tendency, at least to some degree.
Good. But if I interpret your main problem, then it's sort of players outside the value chain making money from music without share, because you need to have the device, you need to have the broadband connection, etc., and you pay for that. Okay, interesting. Charles, what's your biggest problem?
Well, if this is
despite being behind, besides being chased down the runway, and
in this band, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. The band. Nobody cares about your songs.
I was going to say, in this band, I write all these songs and nobody wants to listen to
Stick
them.
to covers.
It's great. It's 13 minutes. It's got 4 parts. I wish you guys would listen to it, but they never do. My complaint is stupidity and ignorance and short-sightedness and lack of vision. And particularly at a level of the market that should know better. So if you look at the way new services come to the market, and you look at the lawyers that advise these people and the venture capitalists that advise these people, and the stupidity of some of the structures that are put into place that end up just alienating and confusing consumers, which is the last people we want to alienate and confuse, is the biggest thing holding us back. Is you've got people, you know, the incentives all across this space are so misaligned, from people trying to flip their little startup into a multi-billion company in 3 years, to people thinking that, you know, if you give Universal Music and Sony Music all of your money, you're going to be successful, through to people building these ridiculously complicated systems that consumers don't understand. That's the most frustrating thing to me.
Paint us a picture. Name some names. You said Universal, but we want something. Actually, can we shut off the camera for a second?
I mean, look, I'll go back a little bit so as not to offend anybody contemporary, but this still happens, right? So when MySpace Music, or MySpace, was the biggest space on the planet for musicians to find new fans and to have your music heard. When it came time to try and turn that into a business, the genius moves included getting News Corporation involved, because they're so experienced in the digital music space, of making that decision that even though we've built this entire business on breadth and diversity of ecosystem and individual musicians and small labels, is we're actually going to build all of the value to go to the major labels. So that when the customer comes now to MySpace, instead of their usual experience, they're getting hit in the face with Britney Spears or Carly Rae Jepsen or whatever it was at the time. and essentially in the last 3, I mean, who's used MySpace in the last 2 years? It's gone from the number one platform to absolutely nowhere in this ridiculously short period of time, because nobody was able to actually resist the land grab by the major labels to see that this was an opportunity to take all of that music usage into their own pockets, to get corporate interests to buy into the ridiculousness in that vision, and nobody actually listening to the people who were using the platform as to what it was that they might actually pay for. And we see that repeated over and over again. It's happening now. And I'm astounded that, almost 9 years after we saw, or 8 years after we saw the first wave of that kind of short-sighted, technocratic, ignorance, it still goes on today.
We're going to take some questions from the audience. You have been patiently waiting for your chance to speak, and we don't mind if you rant rather than ask a question. Anders, do we have until klockan 4 or 10:04? Klockan 4, really good. All right. Sometimes, Charles, sometimes those old, dead and buried social networks bounce back. We had a case like that just weeks ago with Lunar Storm. Who registered an account in the new Lunar Storm? Hands up. Nobody. Okay, so maybe it didn't bounce back.
You did.
I heard about it on the radio. Do we have an extra mic? And also, do you have a question for the panel? Anyone? Keep thinking about your questions. So now we heard 4 problems. We heard dominant players, slow progress, people outside the food chain taking your money, and stupidity. I think that's a great set of problems. That's something for me to work with. Now I want 2 kinds of answers for you. I want what can you do and what do you want somebody else to do about these problems. Trond, what can you do?
So what I think we are contributing to now, and we can even be better at that, is taking all the new instruments and all the new knowledge that is out there and bringing that out to the music industry for the indies. Not only for the majors to do that and keep more of the market, but we try to do that for the indies to spread the knowledge and to help building tools around new opportunities there. As for the big fight between majors and indies, I think we just should do our thing much, much better, because I don't think the majors will ever lose that grip. That's my take on that.
Okay. Åsa, what can you do about the slow progress?
I have to
besides sitting on
develop
panels
a very,
and
very
complaining.
strong head, so I can bank it against the wall. There is, I mean, I'm fortunate to sit in a place where I actually see I can do some minor little tweak change in regards of making it possible for music rights to flow into all these new inventions that comes in, and be aware of them and discuss with them already now, like, what can we do? Is there a creative solution of how this actually can use music as much as possible, and not being stuck with, oh, it has to be done this way or that way. So I actually think I can do some change there, and I hope I will. And in regards of everything going too slow, I think as a market we should start looking outside of ourselves, of music, and look at what other things are doing and what's happening. And I go back to games, but that because I've been playing around in that area together with you, I guess. But I definitely think that, I mean, look at what VR brings you as an experience for concerts. And I mean, there's so many things that we should just bring them in, make it possible to try and make it, you sort of get there and get going. So I think my change would be trying to facilitate that.
Well, what happens in the games industry stays in the games industry. Helen, what can you do about the dominant players?
Well, I think it's really all about the basics. Everything is about the basics. It's about underwriting and emphasising the value of what we stand for, the differences between the independents and the majors, and why what we do and what we produce and that 80%, what that means, and to see that translated into something tangible, and to underline the fact that all artists are born equal, and we need to see that reflected. And I think in terms of the focus, you're right that we shouldn't really focus on what the majors are doing, but I think that we have to focus on how you want the rules of engagement to look like, and say in the online world. So you have to make those rules yourself, and you have to persuade those who are creating the environment, the regulatory environment. You have to persuade them that they have to write the other rules in a different way, in a way that is interesting for us and really promotes diversity, and that we can see the difference. Because if you create more space, or if you oblige media and radio to create more space, then there's more space to be filled. And I think that the real challenge for us, and in countries like France, where they have, for example, they have obligations towards local artists and local music, the real challenge there is to see how that you can actually graft that into the online world. I think there are solutions. But certainly sitting in Brussels, I think it's possible to make some changes, or to encourage those who are responsible to make some changes, but we have to underpin it with the story. The storyline has to be cohesive and so compelling that nobody in their right mind would say no. And that, I think, is all goes back to the craft beer story.
It's sort of, what I hear is sort of what you
Ranting.
can do is I love that. That's
What,
all
can
fair
we hear
game.
the
on
lunar
the
story?
No, what you can do is force other people to change.
Yeah.
I love that. That's again, you're a great lobbyist. You stay on message and you try to force other people to change. Speaking of forcing other people to change, Charles, now it's your turn. You said stupidity. Yeah. I'm very curious how you're going to change, what you can do about stupidity in other people.
Well, you have to buy a ticket to Merlin 2. It'll be in cinemas. Be in cinemas in the summer. It's going to be a lot of entertainment. You asked for us not to be boring, but I'm afraid this answer is a bit boring. You know, the answer to ignorance is education. And I think for us, what Merlin does outside of the work we do in licensing platforms and bringing back to independence and helping them improve their digital business is to really underline every day, and with everyone we speak to and in every interaction, the realities around how independents perform, why they're doing better in the digital space, the value that they bring to the businesses, why they're central to the success of digital platforms, and get more and more people to understand that. And in some ways, there's days I'm just really pessimistic because you just hear the same things you used to hear when we started this 7 years ago. On the other hand, the narrative is starting to change, and I think the investment community particularly is starting to look at failures as well as successes. So for us, it's not so much that we're lobbying, but I think we're actually tangibly doing business now that's creating a new set of measures and a new set of numbers that you can put in front of people that are real-world, actual day-to-day figures that start to change that narrative.
When you say make people understand, who are these people? You said the investment community, but who else? Music editors, policymakers, conference organizers, music fans, moderators, who?
It's a wide-ranging set of problems. It's everything from business press to, in the investment community, to people building new platforms, to large corporations that are looking to enter the music space as the value comes in. I think in the next 18 to 24 months, we're going, as the value of particularly on-demand streaming subscription increases so incredibly as it is now, you're going to see big corporate players that have a footprint in the digital entertainment space in some way, whether you're a hi-fi manufacturer or a television manufacturer. You're going to see people wanting to come in and take a piece of that pie. I think that generation of services now has to get it right, because if we screw up the next generation of services, then you lose those consumers, and getting consumers back, as any marketer will tell you once you've disappointed them, is extremely, extremely costly. So I think it's this next phase of evolution that we're really focused on.
All right. Good point. Did you think of any questions? Do you want to rant? Do you want to disagree with anything that's been said on stage? Yes. I think we need a mic. Get him the mic.
I enjoy a nice beer and I enjoy wine, and there are plenty good places where I can drink it. You know, I can sit, I can talk to the guys that serve the wine, that serve the beer, and I can't find that in the music business. You know, the retailer side is not good. It really needs the new players, and especially specialized. We have loads of metadata that never get served. It's difficult to sell music for us that's sort of specialized in special genres. I'd like to hear a little bit what you think about that.
Okay, good. So we'll say it's funny because I have lots of music on my smartphone, but no beer. Over here. Skickar du micken nästan?
I was going to ask about what trends you see, but I can jump onto your question and say an answer to that I've seen as an independent label the last 6 or 8 months is the algorithms coming within Spotify. Because, 2014, we had a great year. You can vouch to that, pitching to Spotify to the editorial part. But that's become a black box within a black box within a black box because everyone wants to pitch there now. But 2014, there were still possibilities, and we'd had a lot of streams from that. But last year, sometime August, I saw a trend on one of our singles. We release tracks every week, but one of our singles that had been out for 3 months, all of a sudden on a Monday, 3rd of August, the artist was on vacation, we just came back. On a Monday, we went from 200 streams to 3,000, and then it started to go down. And next Monday, 3,000. So what's this? It's a pattern. And it was only that single for August, September, October that had that pattern. And then people started to show up on his Facebook page saying, I found you on Discover Weekly. I found you on Discover Weekly. Veckans tips, I think it's called in the Swedish Spotify client. And in December, this December and Christmas, that same pattern happened on 10 tracks. I think December 18th or something like that. The Monday before Christmas, 10 tracks started to show that. And that lasted not as long, but it lasted for at least January. And if that happens on our catalog, and you start to see that, so that even if you have a jazz catalog of 1,000 tracks, but you start to see that, jazz fans will get their jazz on their weekly playlist, and they will go there. It's a robot that makes that playlist. It's not the guy on the other side of the counter of your favorite record store. But if that robot knows you better than anyone else, you have the solution. So I see that. I see for niche genres, if you have catalog that have had trouble for the last 10 years, that might be a solution. But what I wanted to ask you guys regarding trends, now I've given you a trend, but I really like the VR thing and what's coming in the games, movies, cross-genre solutions. But I wanted to ask you, any more of these interesting things? What do you see for next year and in 1 to 2 years? What do you see? Trends, one each, please.
Wow,
No.
that's great. Okay, one more question. Gone. Okay. So we have robots, retailers, and trends. Trond, you want to start us off on the retailers and robots?
Yeah, at first, I think you have a very valid point of the experience of going to the vinyl store earlier, sitting there talking to the man or woman behind the counter and learning about music and discussing music, listening to music. I used to work in a record store myself, and I love that, the whole thing. Yesterday is the last time I heard someone talking about a vertical store, making a jazz store that was fantastic, or an indie store that was fantastic. And I've been discussing with people also in the company, and every time we come to a conclusion that we need to be in the big store, we just need the separate room because we need to have the connection to the outer world, because this jazz store could possibly connect to Eminem, like all of a sudden, or whatever music outside there. So I think for me it's not an answer yet, but it's an interesting thought that I think in these times people are talking more about specialized stores, but I think there's a lacking thing still. It's the context, and I think, of course, when we have now Rap Genius, now called Genius, I think, yeah, when that is coming in with lyrics, that will also contribute to the general context of what we used to have with an album cover. I think still there's lots of opportunities there which we haven't seen yet that might touch into your questions also. The whole experience thing, I think we haven't solved quite sophisticated yet, but people are working on that all the time. So I'm quite optimistic about more experience-based music situations in the future. For trends, I see very short-term trends, so I probably will just what I'm seeing. Germany is moving up, and US is going more towards streaming. Most important things. Don't know about Japan, how long it will take, but the CDs, the people working with CDs, I think it's more towards what they call the corner office, where the windows are like open, and I think that will be a big change there. I don't know when. So that's the biggest market I've been thinking of and looking into. Yeah.
I don't get it with the corner offices.
Oh, sorry. It's a very, very bad metaphor, but it's when you move towards the corner office is when you're supposed to jump out of the window, because that's how you quit your job.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, that's horrible.
Oh, you don't say that in Sweden. I'm
I
sorry.
thought the
I
corner
didn't
offices
mean to
are
break
quite
it.
good because you
Yeah.
get 2 windows.
Yeah, I thought
No,
that was the
it's-
executive office, but maybe that's
It's one step
Yeah.
before suicide.
executive.
Okay,
is
I
good.
so
sit
you
in the
get
middle
to
of the
I
room.
see, right. Two windows you increase makes it quicker for an exit. Wonderful. More
Okay,
temptation.
let's not go down that road.
Absolutely not.
Trond, before you go, and this will be your last intervention, I give you one wish. Anything?
Like anything?
Yes.
No, for this, I'd like to see music as general more in the media. I think we are losing out a bit because we're not doing enough job there to be. I mean, we can do the idols and then we do the small columns in the small papers. I think there's a gap between that that we could fill out. I don't know if I have any solution to it, but I think there's some opportunities there. There's drama, emotion, just everything with music. People are super interested, and we just don't seem to solve it really well. We can compare ourselves with sports, and of course that's more money. It's big parts involved. That is mediation, but still, I think there's something that we're missing out on. That's the big frame thing, and for the indies, I think seeing us working more together with actually the craft bear moment, getting the indies to say this is indie music, this is what indie is. Indie is authenticism, is people owning their own music, and they need the same game rules as the big players in the market. So I think that's my wishes.
Great. So you went from wish to wishes. Good move, but sorry, that disqualifies you. I can't grant them. Åsa, one trend, one wish, real quick.
One trend, one wish. VR, one trend. I don't say anything more, you'll see what's to come. One wish, additional new... My wish is that there will be a fantastic new platform that I can't even imagine now, where actually your music experience and all this intensity and that we were talking about could fit in. So a platform for it that I can't imagine now.
Brilliant. Granted. Helen, trend, wish.
Trend, I think that the trend is that we don't know what the trends are going to be. They're going to change so fast and very quickly. So you were saying not quick. I think it's going to be so quick we won't know. And in terms of the wish, my wish is that when we're looking at copyright issues, there's a much deeper understanding of why copyright is important, and we'll see a move towards making sure that platforms actually play properly and that they treat artists the same regardless of the label that they're signed to. I know that's more than one wish.
No, it's okay. I'll join
But
you in making that wish come true.
Yep.
I don't like how you dodged the trend thing, but I'll let it pass. Charles, one trend, one wish.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of trends, but based on this question, I was going to say one of the trends I think is specialization. And one of the challenges, I think, for genres at the moment is you know, it again, to use an old world analogy, you know, trying to open a jazz streaming service now in the space is like opening a jazz specialist store in a town of 200 people. You know, you're never going to have enough people walking through the door to sustain your business. I think as the market grows and as the value grows, specialization, and we're starting to see this in terms of people pitching ideas to us for new kinds of services, is, you know, outside, I think, of what Trond says is right, which is your ability to create your own destinations in the big stores, is, I think, people being really clever about how they can get people down very specific paths. My wish is that some group of young people somewhere who, you know, come and kick our asses and show us something new, like really in a way that we're not expecting.
Good, brilliant. Thanks. I'm not young, so I can't be part of that, but we appreciate the vision and the wishing. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the panel. Is indie music ready for its craft beer moment? I have failed miserably as a moderator. I don't think they disagreed on one single thing. Can you think of something they disagreed on? I can't. It's hopeless. So I don't know if I'll ever be invited back, but it was fun. Thank you very much. Don't be too hard on me. And we sure look forward to the Lemonheads reunion record. A big hand.